Prodigal, welcome to week 2 of Skeptics Welcome. Easter is just 3 weeks away. We'll be having 2 services at 9 and 10:30 with our annual Easter egg hunt right in between at 10 a.m. This will be an incredible morning. We can't wait to celebrate our risen Savior together. The following Sunday, we'll be having our spring baptism service. This is an incredible Sunday service. If you want to get baptized or would just like more information about baptism, feel free to send us an email at prodigalchurchfresno@gmail.com or reach out to any of our staff. They'd love to talk to you about it. Our spring small groups are starting the week after Easter, and we could use some more leaders and hosts. If you're interested in leading or hosting, make sure you talk to Pastor Brittany. These groups are being finalized, and we'll have more information on how to sign up to be in a group soon. Coming up this spring, we'll have our Mother's Day service as well as our church picnic. To stay up to date with our calendar, make sure you have that Prodigal Church app downloaded. If you're newer to Prodigal, we'd like to encourage you to head to our website, prodigalchurchfresno.com. Fill out our digital Connect card. This is another tool we use to keep everyone up to date with all things Prodigal. If you'd like to give, you can do so in the app, on our website, or at the kiosks in the foyer. Thanks for joining us today for week 2 of Skeptics Welcome. Have a great day.
Faith deconstruction is a movement grabbing a lot of attention.
So often faith deconstruction makes use of a philosophical term, deconstructionism or deconstruction, and it's fundamentally based on questioning what we believe.
To me, faith deconstruction is not controversial, because if it's true, it's true. So there's no threat to, examining what beliefs you've been handed. If they hold up, they hold up.
Where deconstruction and the turning away from and leaving the faith has become some sort of sexy thing to do. I contend that if you ever experience the grace and mercy of Jesus Christ, actually, that's really impossible to deconstruct from.
Deconstruction. Oh my gosh, that's like a curse word in Christendom right now. And deconstruction has become synonymous with walking away from the faith, period. That's all it is. It's deconstruction, atheism. That's what people see in their mind. And they end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater oftentimes. I know because I did it too. That's right, I deconstructed.
Is deconstruction good and potentially fruitful and healthy, or is it bad? Is it negative? Is it going to cause you to walk away from your faith?
There's something so negative about that thing.
Are you there, God? Because right now, I'm not so sure.
My dad is the best. Okay? He knows everything there is to know about construction, and he knows everything there is to know about cars. Growing up, he was our contractor and he was our mechanic. I don't think we ever had to take any of our cars to the shop because our garage functioned as the shop. He'd be under the car, elbows deep in grease, and I would hand him whatever tool he needed. I got a lot of qualities from my dad. I didn't get this one. Okay? I'm not good at working with cars. I've gotten better over the years, but I'm still nothing like my dad. In car engines, they're super confusing. Let's say that your transmissurator is having some problems. That's a thing, right? To get the transmissurator, you basically have to take apart the whole car. Every bolt, every plate, every panel. I remember asking my dad, how did you learn so much about cars? How did you learn this? And he said, well, I did what we're kind of doing right now. I learned by taking them apart and putting them back together. Like it was something that my dad did on weekends while growing up. Take apart a car and put it back together. And nothing tells you more about a machine than taking it apart. Deconstruction is a buzzword that a lot of Christians and former Christians are using to describe a questioning of their faith. Sometimes a challenging of their faith, and in certain cases, an outright rejection of the faith that was taught to them. It goes by many names. It can be described as a wilderness or a dark night of the soul, or it can be an awakening. And for many people, it happens when they encounter something or someone that is different than what they've been taught their whole life. You see this a lot when our kids go off to college. Okay? You've always been taught that this kind of person was bad and you should stay away, and then you live across the hall from them, and then they're not the evil person that you were always told that they were. And well, if that's not true, then what else have I believed that is also not true? Or you were taught that evolution isn't real and there's no science to back it up. And then a PhD in biology does a whole semester with the science to back it up. And that begins a journey that starts with questions, and where the journey ends, well, that's different for every person. Deconstruction isn't a college thing, it's an adult thing. And we should be lifelong learners. So reading and reevaluating should be something that we do for the entirety of our lives. Many of you who are watching or listening online right now are kind of going through a deconstruction right now, or you have been for the last several years. And this word deconstruction has become divisive. Some see it as a fad, something that's negative or destructive or dangerous. It's one step down the slippery slope toward atheism, an outright attack on Christianity. And this is the view that's held by many conservative Christians. And if you were to Google deconstruction, you would no doubt find some very loud and influential voices telling you the dangers of deconstruction. I stumbled upon one prominent Christian author, and they titled the article, "Why We Shouldn't Redeem Deconstruction." And the final sentence in this article said this: "Deconstruction carries the potential to suck unsuspecting Christians into a dangerous vortex of influences from which they might not return." It's intense. So, for some Christians, deconstruction is the greatest existential threat to the gospel. Anybody that looks like they're deconstructing or smells like they're deconstructing, we've got to fight them because there's too much at stake. But not every Christian views deconstruction in this manner. Other Christians praise deconstruction. They say it's an important part of our growing in faith. They think that everyone needs to deconstruct. Everyone ought to challenge their faith, take it apart from time to time. They encourage people to deconstruct. You're getting rid of the myth or naive parts, and you're growing into a grown-up faith. Some Christians love deconstruction and see it as good. Other Christians hate deconstruction and see it as bad. Which is correct? Is it bad or is it good? Well, the answer, of course, is yes. There are two extreme responses that I think have good intentions, but both extremes miss the point. Sometimes those who advocate for deconstruction, they're guilty of cultural accommodation. They are allowing culture to shape their priorities and faith. If culture doesn't like this, well, then let's get rid of it. G.K. Chesterton said, "Being open-minded isn't always a positive thing, because if your mind is too far open, your brain falls out." And we laugh at that, but we also probably see a grain of truth with it. We all have people that we know that in an effort to be open-minded, which is a good thing, they begin to have no convictions at all. What can happen is you can get so scared to commit to an idea. Are you the person that asks all the questions but never arrives at any answers? Because it is easy to ask questions, but it is hard to come to answers. Are you afraid to commit to Jesus for fear of being closed-minded? There is a temptation to use deconstruction as an excuse to do and believe whatever we want, to make your own rules. But on the other side, to those who view deconstruction as bad and dangerous, the temptation is not toward cultural accommodation, but rather cultural isolation. This is a threat to the gospel. The world is getting worse. Let's stay safe with Christians. This is not the time to be asking questions about our faith. We need to rise up and meet the moment. But this extreme is also wrong, because it is not dangerous to ask questions about your faith. It is not dangerous to challenge the things that you were taught. It is not dangerous to rethink beliefs that were given to us. It is not a healthy thing to repress our doubts, to repress our questions. Okay, that's what cults do. Tim Keller wrote this: "A faith without some doubt is like a human body without any antibodies in it. People blithely go through life too busy or indifferent to ask hard questions about why they believe as they do. They will find themselves defenseless against either the experience of tragedy or the probing questions of a smart skeptic. A person's faith can collapse almost overnight if she has failed over the years to listen patiently to her doubts, which should only be discarded after long reflection. Believers should acknowledge and wrestle with doubts, not only their own, but their friends and neighbors. It is no longer sufficient to hold beliefs just because you inherited them." There is a reality of doubt amongst our community of faith. Deconstruction means to take something apart. And when we apply it to our faith, it means that we challenge or take apart our faith. And that is the focus this morning. And I don't even think that deconstruction is the right word to describe the process. I think a better word for it would be renovation. My faith and my spiritual life have been undergoing a near constant renovation that certainly does occasional demolition, but it involves more rebuilding and reconfiguring. It is taking something apart, but for a purpose. You see, there is a difference between deconstruction and destruction. If all we ever do is deconstruct our faith paradigm, we will be left without a roof over our head. And I don't want you to be without a roof. I do want you to challenge your assumptions, ask difficult questions, and to take personal responsibility for your values and your contributions in this world. No one can do this for you. You cannot outsource the spiritual life. But I do not want you to demolish what is beautiful and good and true, because you have put everything into this heap of rubble. You have thrown the proverbial baby out with the proverbial bathwater. By the way, what a terrible metaphor. Throw the baby out with the bathwater? Who is giving their baby a bath and then you apparently have to dump the bathwater and forget that your baby is in the water? And why are you throwing the water out? Just lift the drain. Okay. I digress. Prodigal Church is a place of renovation. This is a place of rethinking. And it's okay. You're safe here. If you're struggling through and asking deep questions about the faith that you have always had, I want to be really clear. Your story of deconstruction or renovation, it requires more care and attention than a simple Sunday sermon can provide. These messages can serve as conversation starters, but your questions and your understandings of the Bible and God deserve so much more space than this. So give someone a call. Give us a call. Also, we're going to be launching our small groups the week after Easter. They're also a fantastic place for questions. There is a way to deconstruct, to renovate, that leads you to become more whole, more compassionate, more loving, more Christ-like. And there is a way to deconstruct, renovate, that leads you to become more jaded, more cynical, more resentful. Let us do the former, not the latter. In the four Gospels, Jesus asks 307 questions. He himself is asked 183 questions in the Gospels. And out of the 183 questions that he was asked, guess how many he answered in a straightforward yes or no way? 3. And they were all before Pilate when his ministry was already over and done with, and he was ready to go to the cross. All of the other times, he either answers the question with another question, or he tells a story. What does that tell us? Well, at the very least, it tells us that perhaps sometimes that asking the right questions is more important than giving the right answers. My faith and my understanding of God have been under renovation for a very long time. I finished my undergraduate degree in contemporary Christian ministries and biblical studies in 2003. I had all the answers. And then I went to seminary and I got my master's degree in Old Testament. Okay, I learned a lot. I learned how to read the Bible in its original language. I learned Hebrew. And this was not a very popular major at my seminary. In fact, in my Hebrew 3 class, there were 3 total students in the class. I remember one day, the 2 other guys were sick, and so they weren't there. So it was just me and the prof. I'm 24 years old, and I had to raise my hand and ask if I could go to the bathroom. Because if I left, he was in there all by himself. And so he took the liberty and went to the bathroom as well. Okay, we went to the bathroom together. Shalom. And though I learned a lot at seminary, surprisingly, I still had all the answers. It wasn't until after seminary when I began to read and study because I wanted to, not because I had to. And so I read, and I began asking questions and growing and learning and changing and renovating. And I haven't stopped since. Learning usually passes through 3 states. In the beginning, you learn the right answers. In the second state, you learn the right questions. And in the third and final stage, you learn which questions are worth asking. We have to move from the complacency that creeps up in our lives. The complacency that says, you're done with school, you don't need to learn anything else, you know enough, plus you don't have time anymore. The Spirit of the living God declares to you now, you are never too old to learn, and you are never too young to learn. Learning moves us from complacency to vibrancy. And I'm going to get really real here, and I want to say something that might be fairly bold. I really believe that perhaps the biggest problem in American Christianity is the lie that Sunday morning is enough. Coming to hear a sermon once a week is not enough. It's a good start, but very quickly it stops being learning and it starts being complacency. Because if we only learn from church on Sundays, and that is our only form of learning or study, our brains become impervious to new knowledge and new insights and new realities that are all around us. The church or the pastor has done all of the thinking for us. I don't need to read the book, I'll watch the movie. I have seen so many Christians in so many churches become so narrow-minded, not because of their own convictions from following Jesus and studying the Bible, but from allowing the church to do their thinking for them. Proverbs 18:15. The heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out. Knowledge is not something that we should be afraid of. Knowledge is something that we need to pursue. But for many of you watching or listening online right now, you have some questions. You're not even sure about this whole Bible, Jesus, Christianity thing. Like, is this even for real? And your application might be study, ask questions, double check what I'm saying. Because questions are not bad, questions are good. And when the Christian church over the last several centuries has refused to allow questions, that's when the church has been the least Christ-like. Check this out. The Apostle Paul was discipling this new group of Jewish believers in a place called Berea. And this is what the author has to say in Acts 17:11. Now, the Berean Jews were of more noble character than those in Thessalonica, for they received the message with great eagerness, and examined the scriptures every day to see if what Paul was saying was true. Interesting. Luke could have written that the Berean Jews were of more noble character because they received the message with great eagerness and trusted everything that the Apostle Paul said without question because he was the Lord's anointed. That's not what it says. These Berean Jews were positive skeptics. They had the posture of, well, we've got questions and we're eager to find the answers. Thank you, preacher man Paul, who authored 13 New Testament books. Don't mind if I double check. And then this is applauded in the New Testament as a beautiful way for people to grow and learn. That's beautiful. This double checking is written into the scriptures. We should never have a blind faith where there is this paid professional holy man standing in the front saying, "Thus saith the Lord," and then you say, well, the Lord's anointed has spoken, I'm going to believe it. No, we want you to be engaged. Bible's open. Don't just blindly believe something. Know the reasons you believe it or not. Our goal is not to teach us what to think, but how to think, to encourage us to approach the Bible in a Jesus-centered way and learn together. We want to run the ramp of reason before we take the leap of faith. Gandhi famously said, "I like your Christ. I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ." One commentator, Robert Yarborough, said, "Who has not encountered the doctrinaire, the morally scrupulous, but hate-filled, self-confessed follower of Jesus?" We have all encountered this person. May it not be us. Prodigal Church has been a place where people who have been hurt by the church can find healing in the church. Prodigal Church has been a place where people who have left the church saying, "I'm never going to step foot into another church again," those very same people have braved the long walk from the parking lot and walked in our doors. I love that we are that kind of church. But being that kind of church is less about Sunday mornings and more about how we live and how we love outside of our Sunday morning worship experience. It has been and will always be about people and how we love them in real life, in real time. It's not about an engaging Sunday morning worship service. It's about individuals. It's about people. So how can you best serve your family and friends who are going through some faith renovation? Are you familiar with the military strategy called shock and awe? Shock and awe is a military strategy based on the use of overwhelming power and spectacular displays of force to paralyze the enemy's perception of the battlefield and destroy their will to fight. The United States used this strategy in Operation Desert Storm way back in the 90s. Shock and awe is also the same approach taken by well-meaning Christians who encounter people that are deconstructing their faith. You're deconstructing sermons, Bible verses, more Bible verses, Bible studies, all these things. Read this book. Here's another book. And if that friend doesn't return to the faith that you understand, then they're left as a pariah. Sometimes the most well-meaning Christians mistake a moment for shepherding as a moment for apologetics. Shepherding, soul care, you're hearing them, you're listening to them, you're loving them, you're hearing their story, you are weeping with them as they weep. That's shepherding versus apologetics. I need to defend the faith. I need to articulate well-reasoned arguments for my biblical faith. Both are well-intentioned. Both are needed. But in my experience, When spending time with people with lots of questions about their faith, it is not time to bust out our greatest hits, to bring out our apologetics arguments. It is a moment to be present with them and to listen to them and to love them. We are all too often quick to defend our faith rather than sitting with the hurting. So can we do that, Prodigal Church? Can we listen to understand instead of listening to argue? And as we begin to close our service today, I want to make this even more personal and practical. Some of you have family members who have come to a very different understanding of faith and God than the way that you understand faith and God. It could be cousins or aunts or uncles, but it affects us most deeply when it is our sons and daughters, when it is our grandsons and granddaughters. And though my own children are young, I have certainly walked alongside many parents and grandparents through seasons like the ones I have just described. And my encouragement is this: pray, be a good example, and let them find their way. You can't make them believe the way that you believe. You can't make them the way you want them to be. When it matters most, the quality of your relationship with your kids or your grandkids will determine the weight of your influence. When our kids are young, size and position equals control. Okay, you can make them do things. You can lock doors. You can put them in the back seat. You can force them to eat something because you have size and position. Eventually you won't. They will be bigger than you. My mom hasn't been able to strap me into the back seat for a very long time. I would have a much easier time putting her in the back seat. Eventually, you have to change from size and position parenting to relationship and influence parenting. And sometimes when our kids are bigger, we try to parent them with size and control, and it has the opposite effect. You need to be going to church. You need to stop listening to them, and you need to do this, and you need to do that. And it begins to erode the relationship and influence that you're desiring. Pray. Be a good example, and let them find their way. I pray that we would show and extend grace to those who are going through a season of renovation. And if that is you, and you are going through a season of deconstruction or renovation or whatever you want to call it, and you're doing it alone, or you feel alone, give us a call. Send us an email. Let's hang out. Or find other trusted relationships in your life that you can reach out to and begin to process these things in the open rather than just internally. It's too big of a weight to bear by ourselves. Invite others into your questions. God, I pray in Jesus' name that you would be near to us and that we would experience your comfort and peace in the midst of the dark night of the soul, in the midst of the wilderness. Pray, God, that through questions and doubt and research and digging and wrestling and struggling, that our faith becomes stronger in you. We love you. We give you this day and beyond. In Jesus' name, amen. I want to thank you so much for joining us for week 2 of Skeptics Welcome here at Prodigal Church. We hope you have an amazing week. Grace and peace in the least.